Hello, everyone, and welcome to D2C Dialogues. Today, we have with us Dhruv Madhuk, co-founder and director, Arata. Good hair day every day. High-performing hair care backed by plant-powered science and infused with clinically proven technology. Vegan and cruelty-free. SLS and paraben-free. Sustainable, made for all humans. That's Arata, and today we have got Dhruv Madhok with us. Welcome, Dhruv, to D2C Dialogues.
Hi, Dr. Hitesh. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for such an amazing introduction. I think you've described the company perfectly.
Thank you very much, Dhruv. Pleasure. Uh, Dhruv, let's start with the original idea of Arata. Can you take us back to the day the idea for Arata was conceived? And what led you to recognize a need for an all-natural, safe, and clean personal care brand in India?
Sure, absolutely. I think this dates back to January 2016. I was having a small, get together at home. This was post my wedding, and my good friend at the time and now my business partner, Dhruv Madhuk, had used his mom's 100% natural, homemade, organic flaxseed hair gel, and come for the party. And I noticed he'd used a lot of styling products. So I said, man, aren't you concerned about hair fall and hair whitening? Because when your hair usually looks good and you put it in place, it comes at a trade-off. And historically, the trade-off has been hair fall and hair whitening, because a lot of the gels and styling products in the country and globally, they all have alcohols, fragrances, parabens, DEAs, phthalates, synthetic polymers, which are plastic derivatives to keep the hair in place and shiny. But Basin had seemed to done that without using any bad ingredients. So I asked him, what was the story? And so he said, my mom, she's been boiling organic flax seeds and making this natural hair gel, which is not only good, which is not only not bad for your hair, it's actually good for your hair. So when he sent me a sample 2 days later, I tried it and I loved it. And I said, we have to start selling this. 2 days after that, we're sitting at a coffee shop, one morning and trying to understand what is it about hair gel that, that causes hair fall and hair whitening. When we started researching ingredients, that cause hair fall and hair whitening, like I mentioned, the alcohols and fragrances, the parabens and whatnot, we noticed that they were not only being used in styling products, but they were being used in shampoos, face washes, toothpaste, lip balms, deodorants. But customers seemed to have only a problem with styling products. That was because they could see the signs of hair fall and hair whitening much earlier than they could see the damage that was happening all around them. When we started noticing these and everything else, that's when we realized that, what, it's not only an opportunity for us to launch a clean styling company in the country, this is an opportunity to have an entirely clean and safe, non-toxic hair care and skincare brand. And that was how we started. But interestingly, now we're 4 years into the journey. 2016 is when we had the idea, but we didn't incorporate the company till 2017. We were doing R&D, and Basin and I were continuing with our, full-time jobs until we kind of jumped into this full-time late in 2018. And interestingly, till date, some of our best sellers include the styling products, and actually hair care seems to have become the mainstay of the company. So that was a little bit about how we kind of got started and where we are today.
Very interesting, Dhruv. But tell me something that started with a homemade flaxseed hair gel. How does this evolve into a diverse range of products that Arata is offering today?
So, I think what we realized was that the philosophy remains more or less the same. If we were able to make a highly effective product without using any of the synthetic ingredients, any of the, the alcohols, the fragrances, the parabens, the DEAs, the phthalates, the, polymers, we were also able to and make an equally effective, if not a better product than, what was available in the market. We then started using that same philosophy and saying that, can we now do this to other products and other categories? So instead of starting with only a gel, we launched a gel and a cream. We also launched a shampoo and a body wash. We also launched a face wash and a lip balm. And that's kind of like how we got started, because our thought process at the time was that why can't we make a truly honest, effective, brand, which essentially, gives you a very clean bathroom experience. So anything that you put onto yourself, or you put in your mouth, or you apply to your lips or to your skin or to your hair, it should be cleaner. And we realized through R&D that it is possible to make it cleaner. But why wasn't that the mainstream? The reason why it wasn't the mainstream was because it was expensive to make these products. And it was expensive, to go down the traditional channels of, manufacturing, then wholesale, then retail, then, by the time it gets to the consumer, through all these channels, about 30 to 40% of the margin has already been taken away. But thanks to the internet, we were able to sell these products straight to the consumer and pass on, that entire margin to be, one, as a discount to the consumer, and two, use that additional margin to actually improve the ingredients and the quality of product that was, being made. And that actually was the whole concept. It was a fresh and new concept. And in fact, the brand name Arata means fresh and new in Japanese. And that was the whole, objective. And so we started with just one styling product, but we realized that the philosophy, and that framework can be replicated across multiple categories and subcategories.
Nice. Creating a product which is, entirely chemical free and plant based. This is a challenging and a Herculean task. What were the key challenges you had faced at that time? Because you said it was in 17 that you officially registered and started. And today the brand has reached at a considerable stage in its life cycle, although you are just 4-5 years old, technically speaking. Correct. 6 years old. So what were the initial challenges that you faced? Then we will come to your marketing side of the business.
Yeah, so initial challenges are manifold, right? How do we find a contract, a formulator to work with us? How do we find a contract manufacturer who will take on smaller MOQs? How do we, go about procuring the cleaner ingredients that we wish to use? Because, as you'll understand from a supply chain perspective, the most commonly used ingredients are the ones that you find most easily. I remember we used to import, an ingredient called Japanese honeysuckle flower extract from Japan via Singapore, because it was a plant-based alternative to a paraben. It was a plant-based alternative to a preservative. But we knew that it was possible to do it, but it would mean, higher MOQs, higher lead times, more challenges, more cost. So I think there were, many challenges along the way. But what we kind of realized was, as we scaled and as we got momentum, as we found a startup-friendly contract manufacturer who agreed to make 250 units per product of our first batch. But after that, the cycle started and we sold through that first batch. We were able to procure the raw materials at more cost-effective prices, thereby reducing prices as we scaled up. We were able to start sourcing directly from our global suppliers and not go through different distributors that were causing delays in lead times. So I feel like there were a lot of initial challenges and hiccups. And there are hiccups even today, because how do we go about, in a market where there's so much greenwashing happening, where every second brand is positioning themselves as natural, Ayurvedic, herbal, plant-based, vegan, cruelty-free. How do you go about explaining to the consumer your true value proposition? So challenges exist even today. But slowly and steadily and bit by bit, we kind of chip away at them.
So the key challenge, right from starting as an hair gel, today what would be your product portfolio and how many SKUs you must be having?
Sure. So we have 4 categories: oral care, hair care, skin care, and body care. The largest number of SKUs is actually in hair care. Because hair care is where we found, our strongest product market fit, and hair care actually accounts for the most amount of revenue in the company as well. I think it's a factor that both hair care and skincare are great opportunities in the country, but hair care is slightly larger as an opportunity. Number one, and number two, there was more room for innovation and lesser clutter in hair care as opposed to skincare. It's okay, Basim, if you sneeze in the video. Wasim just sneezed and he covered his face as if he's done something terribly wrong. So hair care is a larger opportunity, and that's where we found most product market fit and most consumer love. And it's become like a kind of a virtuous flywheel. And while we have a portfolio and presence across other categories, hair care is our mainstay. And that's not to say that there's any compromise or that we don't follow the same, if not more rigorous practices when it comes to our other products. In fact, there's an American organization called EWG, or Environmental Working Group. And what they've done is they've made it very transparent. They've made a website and a database called Skin Deep, and you can put in any ingredient used in beauty and personal care. So if you go to your bathroom and pick up a shampoo and just read any ingredient and it doesn't make sense to you, put it in ewgskindeep.com and you'll get a toxicity score assigned from 1 to 10. All our products are 1:3, which is entirely safe and non-toxic. All the ingredients that we've used. 4, 5, 6 is potentially hazardous, and 7, 8, 9 could, and 10 could go into potentially carcinogenic territory. So all our products across the board, whether they're in hair care or non-hair care, all have 1:3, 1:4 latest on the EWG scale. And we're the first brand in the country to actually receive the EWG verification. So the point being that a lot of love and consumer demand is in hair care, but that doesn't mean that we don't give enough attention to our other products. It's just naturally as a brand we found a lot of product market fit in hair.
Yes, maybe the core of Arata is at the hair care.
That's right.
That's where you are. But you did mention about one more point, which is my next question as well, is that everybody or almost every second player in the market, especially in the D2C category, are claiming themselves to be, vegan, plant-based, chemical-free, XYZ. How does Arata differentiate? Because that's where, a lot of clutter is happening, and it's already
Right.
there, and we see more and more players because the attractiveness of the market is so huge that more and more players, organized, unorganized, all of them are trying to get into it, getting that pie of the market. But what would be your differentiation?
I think when we started the company back in 2018 is when we actually had our first sale. At that time, it was still novel as a positioning to be, plant-based, clean, non-toxic. But as you rightly said, over the last few years, that has become basically hygiene. So I think, when we started the company for the first 2 years, our first messaging to the consumer was that we're a natural, honest, vegan, transparent, cruelty-free, non-toxic brand that also makes very, very good products that are very effective for your solutions. But over the last 2 years, we've flipped it. And now our first message to the consumer is that we make shampoo that reduces hair fall. We make shampoo that reduces dandruff. We give you a hair gel that makes your hair shiny and holds it in place. And our secondary messaging is we give you a hair gel that's shiny and holds it in place, but it's also vegan, natural, plant-based, non-toxic, cruelty-free. So if you were looking at today, if a consumer is looking at a a global hair gel, and looking at Arata, we are still far superior to our global peers on many levels. One is even if we're not able to beat them on price, and even if we're the same efficacy, we are vegan, cruelty-free, non-toxic. That means we don't use any toxic ingredients. We don't use any synthetically derived ingredients. We don't test on animals. We are sustainable. Furthermore, that means that we use plastic that has been derived from ocean waste and landfills. Not only are we using recyclable plastic, we are using recycled plastic. 4 years ago, Basin and I flew down to China, and we actually found a factory that was taking plastic waste from oceans and landfills, melting that plastic into bottles, sanitizing it, melting it, pelletizing it, and sending it to us. And that's what is called PCR plastic, or post-consumer recycled plastic. So if we're winning, if we're neck to neck on quality, we're neck to neck on price, we're neck to neck on branding, packaging, design, and global, aesthetic, the secondary factors will start kicking in, and that's what we're relying on, and that's kind of like how we've leveraged these aspects of the brand.
So initially you did speak about the features and the attributes, and then subsequently the communication is all about benefits, how effective.
That's right. That's very well put. Yeah.
So with this, what role has transparency played in Arata's brand ethos, that has shaped the relationship with your consumer?
So transparency has been a very important aspect of our business from day one. We try to incorporate elements of transparency wherever possible. So a small example is if you turn around our product and read the label. On the back of the label, every single ingredient that has been mentioned, one would say, or potentially investors would say that why are you disclosing all your ingredients, and why are you, because in India there's two kinds of licenses, right? One can get an Ayurvedic license, and the other is a cosmetics license. In the Ayurvedic license, you can simply write proprietary Ayurvedic medicine and just only disclose a few key ingredients, and then just write base QS, or base quantity sufficient, where you don't have to disclose what goes into it. But we've chosen to, even though we have Ayurvedic formulations, to get cosmetic licenses and disclose. And even when we have Ayurvedic licenses, we still voluntarily go and disclose every ingredient used. Now, does this leave us vulnerable to competition copying our products? Sure, that's fine. But we believe it's more important for the consumer to read every single ingredient on the back of the label to understand what is going on to their face, body, skin, and hair. And not only have we done that, we've gone one step further by putting a breakdown of every single um, of giving a layperson's description of every single ingredient. So when you read cocoa glucoside, you may not be able to to decipher what that is, and what that does for you, and whether this product should be used or not. But when we write cocoa glucoside, or a coconut based cleanser next to it, you can suddenly say, relate and say, okay, fine, this is a coconut based cleanser, must be good for you, and let's go ahead and use it. And then one step further, we've written, we've put all our certifications and testing on our website. On the website, we have a section called certifications, where we've put a PDF of every single product that has been tested for heavy metals, for efficacy, for safety. And so we've tried to make this as transparent for the consumer, so that they can be more empowered, make more thoughtful decisions. And even if they decide not to buy from us, or even if it means that competition can be inspired by our formulations, we're still winning because the ecosystem is evolving.
How has this, can you elaborate on the testing process, in the sense, one is the process part of it, and I'm not talking about the technical part of the process, but from a consumer's perspective.
Right.
How important is it to put, because seldom people, put these kind of reports.
So we do something called a dermatological test, because it's our responsibility that before we put anything in the market, we want to make sure it's entirely safe for for human use. We do which and these are patch tests that are conducted by independent third-party labs. There's a French company called Spin Control that has a lab in Bombay called Mascot Spin Control that does our testing, majority of our testing for us. We do safety tests, we do efficacy tests, we do heavy metals tests. And a lot of these tests are conducted by this third-party lab, and only when we receive a satisfactory score is and in most cases it's a non-issue. In fact, in all cases it's a non-issue. And I remember in the first few tests, we were so happily I wouldn't say surprised, but we were actually blown away by by the results, because the first ever test that we got done was for our hair gel. And we found, and how these tests work is they actually keep your product, and then they compare the body's reaction to your product versus the body's reaction to water, because that's the control. So they take a cotton patch, dip it in water, and cotton patch and dip it in the Arata hair gel, and apply it to the back of of a volunteer, and they monitor things like inflammation, breakage, redness, all that stuff. We found absolutely zero zilch. We were so happy to see that the hair gel is as safe as water when applied, onto the hair and scalp for the consumer. So like this, we do our testing before we, go ahead and launch our product.
That's fantastic, Dhruv. Another area which I wanted to speak about is the sourcing process. Arata seems to take great pride in its sourcing process. Could you talk about the relationships that you have with the the organic farms and the farmers, or the stakeholders across, and how does this contribute to the quality of your product?
So we, there are many ingredients that that are certified organic, that we procure directly from the suppliers, from the from the brand owners. There are many other products that there are many other ingredients that that are procured directly by the contract manufacturer. But then of course that information is shared with us from an approval of specifications perspective, because for every ingredient there are different qualities of of specs. So to be honest with you, we don't have a the kind of a it's not a very we don't market this relationship very much. We don't do too much about it. We don't celebrate it too much. But we of course continue to maintain strong working relations with with all our suppliers, because when if they're able to continue sustaining their business and scaling their business, ultimately we are benefiting as well, because we're able to get better scale as they produce more. And the more we sell, the more they thrive. So it's kind of like a bilateral relationship.
Before we go to the marketing part of it, one question which I wanted to ask you is, Arata is the first personal care company in India, and please correct me if this is right or wrong, to use up to 100% recycled plastic packaging across its entire product range. Is this right?
That's correct.
Oh,
This is
that's
absolutely
awesome.
right. This is
So
absolutely
how did
right.
you
So
achieve this? And 100% is something which 100% recycled plastic packaging.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so our bottles are actually 100% recycled plastic. Our tubes are up to 75% recycled plastic. Jars are up to 100% recycled plastic. So the tubes are up to 75%. That also because tubes have to be a certain weightage, like a certain thickness, because if you make them too thick, then you can't squeeze them. Otherwise, like our bottles and jars, they would have also been 100% recycled. And I touched upon this earlier. Basin and I, we in the early days, we knew that we didn't want to contribute to the plastic waste, pandemic and the plastic waste problem. So we wanted to to be a conscious brand, and we wanted to make sure that we're above the board from an ESG perspective. 5 years ago, even when it wasn't a conversation that brands were talking about, sustainability wasn't a conversation most brands are talking about. It was very close to us. As as a brand value. So like I mentioned, we went to a factory. We found a supplier in China at the time. Now over the last 2-3 years, seeing the demand, perhaps I can't say pioneered by us or spearheaded by us, but perhaps inspired by us. In some scale, there have been other brands that have been starting to use a percentage of post-consumer recycled plastic in their packaging. And when you look at it, it's so wonderful because we're taking plastic waste from oceans and landfills and reusing them, giving them a second life. And once they have been used, they can further again be recycled again by melting them and repeating that process. Apart from that, we also use other best practices like using no single-use plastic. We don't use shrink wrap. We use jute bags in our packaging instead of bubble wraps. We don't use excess, of sellotape, sticking tape, while packaging. So we're trying to be mindful in the most granular fashion as possible.
I think this sustainability and sustainable practice that Arata is following adds a lot to the brand, and there is one section of the consumer who always looks out for sustainable products and sustainable packaging.
Certainly.
With this, Dhruv, let's come to the operations part and the business part of it. Currently, you started as a D2C brand, and today also you are a D2C brand. What are your plans and what kind of business? So, are you going to go offline? You have gone offline as well, but I'm talking more from a business perspective where you will be opening your own stores and all those things. So, just tell us more about that part, Dhruv.
So to be honest with you, there's so much headroom for growth online itself. That we can, that we continue to focus on online at least for the next 18 to 24 months. Perhaps once we get to a sizable scale, we'll be able to to go offline. And when we do go offline, we'll continue to do these dipsticks like I'd mentioned to you. We're in about 30 odd stores, in the south and west. And in the initial days, we were in about 15 odd stores in NCR. But these are more like modern trade stores and shop and shop formats. That would probably be the way we would go offline first as well, and we would try to corroborate data and understand that if online, these are the 3 or 4 major cities where we get big sales, and in modern trade these are the 3 and 4 big cities where we get great sales, then where is the intersection? What is the in that Venn diagram? And maybe those would be great spaces to have potentially an exclusive business outlet or a more established prominence, a more prominent space in like a shop and shop model. But again, that's 2 years in a startup is a lifetime. So subject to market risks and subject to change, but the plans are to not go offline immediately for the next 12 to 18 months.
Subject to market risks, and that's a subject with all the players across. But you had a steady increase of 10% in GMV month on month in 2022.
Correct.
What do you attribute, what do you attribute this success to, and how do you, plan to sustain this?
So the success was attributed to a few things. One was the stickiness in consumer. Especially for some of our most prominent ranges like the wavy and curly range or the styling solutions that we make. The lack of perhaps close substitutes for these. Number one, so the uniqueness in the product. Number two, it was the expansion of products into different, going from 25 SKUs to 50 SKUs also gives us an organic bump in sales, and then also expanding our and deepening our presence across marketplaces. Whereas before we were first heavily focused, in FY20 and 21 we were mostly focused on D2C, whereas 22 we had a big influx of revenue coming in from marketplaces as well, and which is the continuing trend. So I think these three have led the have kind of led to the growth. Beyond this, there are many metrics. Increasing conversion rates, reducing cost of customer acquisition, improving average order value, getting them the same customer to buy slightly more in every transaction. Expanding into new channels, doing joint business plans with those channels, expanding into new formats like offline, like we've done in the last 1 year, quick commerce, which we've just recently done. I think there's so much, and it's so dynamic, this environment. So between products, channels, formats, and increasing metrics, it's kind of like a symphony, of moving parts that leads to step-by-step growth.
So these are all the forward-looking strategies and actions that you have to do. What would be your key goal, and what's the key next summit that Arata would be climbing, or the next benchmark that you are looking for yourself in terms of numbers? And you did mention how you are going to achieve that, but any particular benchmark or target that you have in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think previously our benchmark and numbers and targets were always top line. And I'm sure you've heard this across the board, but our next major milestone, and I'd say we're not at the summit, we're at the base camp. Hopefully by the month of June, this month itself, if not next month, the company will become profitable. And I think that has been the number one goal that we've been focusing on for over the last 12 months. And we've kind of, worked on it, step by step. As Basim, my co-founder, says, we couldn't have, pulled the handbrake. We've had to kind of like change gears. And we had to change the focus of the company from moving of just pure revenue growth at all costs to quality revenue growth, even if that meant, moving 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then kind of focusing on profitability. And happy to report that, May we had a minimal, EBITDA loss, and June will probably be our first flat month, and July will be our first profitable month. So that's the first milestone that we're going towards. And the day we hit, 1 rupee in profit, then that's, as we like to say, it's day zero for us, because, we've kind of accelerated growth over the last 4 years, thanks to, the access to, venture capital and, debt funding. But now we're at a point where we've built, a sustainable business that's now ready for scale. And, we're going to start from, from a clean slate.
Profitable, that 1 rupee profit also gives a sense of satisfaction, and it infuses confidence not only in us but the team and the investors as well. From an investor's
Absolutely.
perspective, what would be your future plans vis-a-vis fundraising and things like that?
So, we've had a series of conversations over the last 1 year with the likes of, a few strategics who had been, keen on investing in the company. We've had conversations with, pure play financial investors, and we've had, conversations with debt investors. And what we realize is, because the company as an organization, we're not fueling the growth with a very high burn. The objective is now to fuel and scale the company by using debt. And debt terms, first debt wasn't available because we were so heavily loss making. Then debt started becoming available, but with revenue-based financing. Then debt started becoming available with short-term, to medium-term debt at very, very expensive rates. Now debt is available for, for long-term at better rates, and it'll keep improving from here. So our objective is to is to not necessarily tap into the VC, PE, or equity side of of capital. The goal is to kind of tap into the debt side of capital and scale up the business. And whenever there's an opportunity to kind of to 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, when we find those 2, 3 big kind of funds that we want to take, then we'll go out and raise VC and PE money or strategic money.
So just stepping aside on this financing part, what advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs, especially in this D2C segment, on the financing part of this? Something that you just mentioned.
Sure. So the financing, the only advice would be that there is definitely benefit in raising venture capital early on if one can build a business that is conducive to raising VC money, because there is a lot of pressure from VC funds to grow, and when you're under pressure, you end up doing amazing things. So it's like we always say that pressure is a privilege, and also we make the company quite professional, as opposed to if we were to just if it were to be self-financed. One is we have access to more capital when you're raising from VCs, because typically VCs will have more money than the average Joe. And if you have your own money and you can invest it, then that's great. But otherwise, VC is there. And the earlier point that I was making, that when you raise venture capital money, you prepare monthly MISs and you prepare monthly reports, and you really professionalize the company. And what happens as a byproduct of that is that you end up really studying and learning every aspect of your business in detail. So step one is to definitely go out and try and raise venture money if and when possible. Step two is, even after raising that money and before raising that money, always try to have positive unit economics. If you're a store, then try to be earning money from every store. If you're a restaurant or cafe, earn from every restaurant or cafe. If you're selling a product, earn money on every transaction, because then that eventually even if in the early days, because of lack of scale, you're not able to build a sizable business, there will come a point, much like it has with us. In the initial days in 2018, 2019, when we raised venture capital, we would not have been able to become profitable no matter what we did, because we needed a certain amount of scale that would yield a certain amount of contribution to cover fixed costs. So if you're positive on a contribution level, that would be the number one advice. So in summary, go for venture capital if you can. Professionalize the business, study and as a byproduct, know your business in and out, but try and make sure you're profitable on every transaction or every unit economics as far as possible.
So final question, Dhruv, 5 years down the line, where do you see Arata and where do you see Dhruv Madhuk and Basin both?
So 5 years from now, hopefully I see, Basin and I, right where we are on these seats doing, exactly what we're doing today, because, it's, entrepreneurship is hard, but it's a lot of fun. And Basin and I, we always say we like to hop, skip and, jump and dance on our way and sing and whistle on the way to work. So hopefully we'll still be doing this. Hopefully apart from this, we'll also be doing some investing on the side into younger startups and paying it forward and providing strategic advisory on how to improve and scale up their businesses. But on the business side, 5 years from now, we would love to see Arata in every single household. There's an opportunity for improving the haircare experience for the country today by making it better for you, better for the environment, a lot more innovation, and all at prices that are not very, very expensive. And the goal would be to basically do that and execute relentlessly for the next few years and make sure that we're able to provide better products and create more value for the customers and for all our stakeholders over the next 5 years.
That was awesome, Dhruv. 5 years down the line, Dhruv Madhuk wants to see Arata in each and every household. And that's a fantastic vision to have. With this, I wish Dhruv Madhuk all the best. And thank you very much for joining us today for D2C Dialogues. That was Dhruv Madhuk, co-founder and director, Arata. Thanks, Dhruv.
Thanks so much. See you next time.